Welcome to the Media Roundtable special edition, where we dive deep into events and topics around the business of audio through the lens of brands and buyers who support it. I'm your host, Jennifer Laine. For today's episode, we're going to focus our conversation around the white paper we released just this week titled Chief Audio Officer, the champion every brand needs to win in audio, and our first ever CAO Summit, which took place in Spotify's LA studios the week of July 14th. First of all, we owed a huge thank you to all the brand marketers from Shopify, Athletic Greens, Skims, Indeed, NetSuite, Oracle, Hello Bello, Instacart, Quip, Bambi, and Babbel, who took the stage to share key insights, raise questions, and speak to the future of the channel. It was a first of its kind event that brought together nearly 100 marketers across 40 brands to talk openly about the challenges they face in audio as an ad channel and allowed them to collaborate on solutions. In the coming weeks, you'll hear rebroadcasts of sessions from the event so you can hear the perspectives directly. Also, if you're a CAO and want to be invited to future events, you can apply for future inclusion by emailing info@chiefaudioofficer.com. Last on the event, a special thanks to the sponsors of the CAO Summit, who provided incredible locations, content, and support throughout the two-day event. Seeker, Spotify, Wondery, thank you so much for all you've done. Additionally, as I mentioned, we released another white paper, our second so far this year. As many of you know, our first white paper, Solving Audio Attribution, remained a hot topic at our CAO Summit, topic we plan to continue working on throughout the year. Our newest white paper, called Chief Audio Officer, the champion every brand needs to win in audio, speaks directly to why we felt the CAO Club is so critical, and we're thrilled to have heard the same from the brands in attendance. As in the white paper, today our episode will focus on what we mean when we say Chief Audio Officer and why we believe this designation is critical to achieving success in the channel. And to dive into these topics with me, I'm joined by Dan Granger, founder and CEO of Oxford Road.
Hi.
Stephen Abraham, president of Oxford Road.
Hello.
Giles Martin, EVP, Strategy and Insights, Oxford Road.
Good morning.
Stu Redwine, VP of Creative Services at Oxford Road.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for having me back.
Thrilled to have you. And none other than Spencer Semonsen, media buyer at Oxford Road.
Hey, how you doing?
Great. Thrilled to be here. Dan, Stephen, Giles, Stu, Spencer, hope you feel the same. Welcome to the Media Roundtable.
This is a fun
one. Okay, so as discussed, let's dive right in. I know we have a lot to get through today. So straight from the top, Dan, do you want to walk the audience through sort of what we mean by CAO?
Sure. CAO stands for Chief Audio Officer. It is a fictitious term. I've never met anyone with the title Chief Audio Officer. And I don't particularly care if I ever do, but, you know, we work in an interesting channel. And a lot of people don't realize this, but you know, in the US, we see about $17.5 billion passing through things like streaming and podcast and radio. And the channel can be a bit of an afterthought. It's kind of the redheaded stepchild in media, or at least it has been for a while. Podcast, I think, has created a renaissance in content creation and created a lot of buzz. But I think a lot of people throw the baby out with the bathwater because it's confusing. It's hard. There are different rules you have to follow. And you can come in as a seasoned practitioner of traditional media or digital media and try to use all the same rules and techniques, and they don't necessarily work in the same way when you apply them to audio. And then we started thinking about, okay, so who are the people that are responsible for this channel? And what does it take to really make it successful? And like everything else, and you guys are sick of hearing me talk about this, but we talk a lot about radical ownership, right? And the difference between success or failure so often with an endeavor is whether or not it's a committee where everybody participates, but nobody's really fully responsible, But most things that are hard, that are going to be successful, usually have one throat to choke who's accountable for seeing the thing succeed. And audio is one of those types of initiatives where we see a much higher rate of success for brands that have a dedicated practitioner owning that channel and taking full responsibility for it. That's one of the key ingredients that we've seen time and time again for marketers who find success and unlock massive performance through audio. The problem was when we try to identify and speak through communications and thought leadership to these people, who are you actually talking to? Are you talking to a CMO? A lot of CMOs don't look at audio. They've got somebody else that does that. Sometimes we work with founders of companies and they're very dedicated to the channel, but sometimes it's someone very junior. It's all over the map. So rather than trying to, cobble together a bunch of random titles to figure out like who should be interested in this, we created a composite that's more of an idea than an actual title. And the way we've tried to bring this idea forward with the hope that it will advance audio's capabilities for brands, we've done two big things that we're talking about today. The first thing that we did was we created a white paper. It's a report. It's long and detailed, but it actually includes some really cool brands, Tommy John, Indeed, Shopify, Quip, all participating to contribute to what does it mean to be a chief audio officer, because they are all chief audio officers. And how can you do it right? How should marketers and executives think about this function inside of an organization? That's the focus of the white paper that we're going to talk about. The other thing that we're talking about is we've created a club called the Chief Audio Officer Club, where we did one event in New York about 3 months ago. And in the last couple of weeks, we had a 2-day event with 3 different events happening within that, where we brought together about 50 different marketers across about 40 different brands to come and talk to each other. Because when you go to the upfronts or you go to an industry event, either audio is an afterthought and you don't really learn anything, or it's just a bunch of people pitching solutions from stage and different shows and different tools. We didn't want that. We wanted to create a forum that was safe for brands to come together and learn from each other about how to navigate this very nuanced but powerful channel that we're all deeply committed to, which is audio.
So over the course of the 3 events, I know we had 3 main themes as an agency that we wanted to stick to and use as North Stars for how we were forming those conversations, and what our focus was in regards to who was on stage, conversations that were being happened in the room, et cetera. So for those who weren't able to attend, do you want to walk us through which of those, or walk us through what those 3 themes were and how we sort of formed conversations around them?
Absolutely. I'll give you the jet tour so that people can know what they might have missed. We focused on 3 themes around audio, and that's purpose, profit, and people. So what we did the first night was everybody came into town and gathered in Culver City. We went to the lovely and historic Culver Hotel. It's a century old. I'll stop talking about that. But what we did was we started to explore the question of how do you align, and we've been talking so much about it on this podcast over the years, how do you align your values as a business? You joined a company that has a mission. Hopefully that mission is more than just to drive EBITDA and sell more products and services. Hopefully there's something larger that you're trying to achieve that actually inspires people to want to affiliate with your brand and want to support your brand. How do you align that with influencers who have opinions and approaches across the map? We talk a lot about brand safety and suitability, which is sort of like the insurance policy, so you don't get in trouble and you can buy things that people are going to not give you grief about. But there's something larger that we really wanted to illuminate. And that's the idea that you can find, with the right tools now, you can find personalities who can become your brand ambassador, and you can assemble hundreds of them and make sure that there's value alignment so that they're actually able to carry forth your message in a credible way that you can feel good about the people that you're supporting and know that it's aligned with your purpose as an organization. So we had a few different panels and really a good party. But the first panel we had We had our old friend Moshe Wanunu, who's been a guest on this show, runs a great news organization called Mo News, and he moderated our panels. We had Meta World Peace, we had Lewis Howes, we had Dr. Drew Pinsky, and we had Whitney Cummings, and they talked about it from a creator standpoint. How do they think about carrying their own purpose and their own mission into a world that's very divided, very fragmented, and where they're now being held accountable for anything that they do or say in any forum? How do they think about that as creators? And then we talked to a group called Seeker, who sponsored the first night. And Seeker is somebody that we've partnered with, and we talked about this last week. We interviewed their founder and CEO, Pat Kondo, but we revealed something called the Civility Score, which actually helps you monitor the level of respect with which people are communicating about other people on their shows, on their podcasts. And so we actually are using this tool to measure concentrations of ad hominem attack on other individuals, because we know that most brands want to affiliate with people that are known for treating people well, and most brands do not want to affiliate with people that are treating people disrespectfully. So that was the first night. It was all about purpose. The second day was a little bit longer. We're not going to go through all the detail, but Spotify hosted us at their Pod City campus in LA. And that's where we talked a lot about profit. And what we mean by that is, like, what are the best practices and the challenges and the solutions to those challenges when you're trying to use audio as a growth channel? And so we got to hear from a number of great brands that you mentioned earlier. We looked at the history of audio. You know, we've been doing audio ads for the last 100 years. First one went out in 1922. We did a jet tour of how we got to where we are today and the crossroads that we're at in the industry. And we talk a lot about this on the show, but, you know, I think we're in a place where people now know that audio is exciting. They're into podcast. But as the world gets more efficient, and as AI comes into play, and as bigger corporate dollars through all the mergers and acquisitions that have taken place come to bear, what's happening is it's getting a little bit less personal. And so we want to keep audio authentic. We want to keep it relational. And this was an opportunity for us to have a conversation with the brands that fund the industry about the importance of that. And then, of course, what we're going to be getting into with a lot of the folks here was a lot of panel discussions around things like analytics, tools of the trade. We talked about creative. We talked about what it's like from a creator's perspective on receiving copy. And then we also had a good panel on best practices in media buying with audio. Finally, we wrapped up with a conversation with our old friend, Alan Jones, CEO of and founder of Bambi. And that was really exciting too. And, you know, hopefully we're going to get to release some of these sessions through our podcast in the coming weeks. The last thing that we did at the CAO Summit was that was about people. And the idea is that you can't be successful in any of this if you don't have a team around you. And if you don't have people that you can talk through your challenges with on an ongoing basis in real life. And everybody had been consuming so much content. We just want to provide a little space for people to connect with each other. We were hosted at the Wondery Amazon Music Campus, which is Culver Studios in Culver City. Absolutely gorgeous historic location. And I had the privilege of doing a fireside chat with Guy Raz, the host of How I Built This. And we got to talk about really a lot of the key themes we had been talking about for the last 24 hours, and then just let people get to know each other better and have a really good time. So that was the Chief Audio Officer Summit. It's something that's invitation only. We're going to be doing it a summit on an annual basis, but we're also going to be doing periodic meetups as we did in New York a few months ago throughout the next year. And so I think a really great opportunity was born for marketers who are looking for people with similar struggles, similar challenges to exchange solutions and best practices and really build relationship with each other so that everybody can continue to support and protect this industry that is not only growing like wildfire, but really making a positive impact for brands and for culture.
I don't know anyone who could have summarized 3 days as concisely and thoroughly as that. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And as Dan mentioned, we're thrilled to be able to share some of those sessions with you. They were infinitely valuable. The perspectives from our own team, but more importantly, from the brands who were involved, were sort of never before shared from stages. As the event we were hoping to support is brand for brand and all around audio. So brand marketers were there. They rolled up their sleeves. They discussed hard topics, and everybody walked out of the room a little bit sort of more confident and more informed as it relates to audio. And that sort of leads me into the second portion of today's episode, which is our aim as Oxford Road to be as informed as possible ourselves, but also to inform our clients, our partners, everyone in the industry as to different challenges that we're all facing. And it's to that end, we white papers are an initiative we take very seriously at Oxford Road. As many of you guys know, we always aim to address a challenge or a question with a solution. It's one of the values we have as a team, to always come with an answer. We're not here to just sit back and wait for someone else to answer or say, well, research it and get back to you, though we do take research very seriously. And it's to that end we brought together some of the brightest and best minds in the industry to speak to this case for a CAO. And the paper that we're putting out today actually is something that we've been working on for several months. And we are thrilled to let you know that it wasn't just an internal team effort. We were able to have brand marketers participate in this initiative, as well, as you'll see in the down paper when you download the white paper. For the audience, for those in the audience who have not downloaded the white paper yet, let me just give you the top 8 points that we touched upon in that paper. And then in the next 20 minutes, we're going to share a little bit of the thinking behind those sections, what we touch on in those sections, and hopefully encourage you to download this, as we think it'll be helpful. Section 1 is exploring the chief audio officer idea. Section 2, audio's innate intimacy, upsides and downsides. Section 3, audio advertising requires and rewards fearlessness. Section 4, endorsement, the Holy Grail. Section 5, metrics and attribution. Section 6, concrete hints for a newcomer to audio. Section 7, why work with a specialized agency. And finally, Section 8, what's on the frontier of audio. Everyone participating on the episode today contributed in their own field to this white paper. And so, Dan, do you want to go ahead and walk people through Section 1, exploring the chief audio officer idea? I know you've already touched a lot on that in the start of this episode, but just to expand a little bit further as to why we felt this was critical to include.
Yeah, and I'll try not to go too long on this. I'm going to quote Stu, who's on the call, but often refers to himself as a midwife to greatness. And I think that's what we had an opportunity to do here with the Chief Audio Officer white paper, because, look, we're an advertising agency. We work with the Chief Audio Officer. We live and breathe in service of the Chief Audio Officer. What's special about this white paper, which can oftentimes just be sales pieces, is that we actually got to feature the chief audio officers themselves at some real serious brands that have really derived a lot of value out of audio. And so I'll read you a couple quotes. One is from Corey Ang at Shopify, who's been fantastically successful using audio as a channel. And Corey is one of the smarter marketers that you'll meet, very analytical. And one of the things that he said is hosts are authorities within their specific domains. They're very credible because they're attaching their names, images, and brands to your product. This is not to say that there aren't shills out there, but with the right host, it comes across as authentic and genuine, and there's more inherent trust within that endorsement and within the medium as a whole. And then he goes on to say, audio in its barest form, most stripped down, is people talking. There's something so human and engaging about that. And I think that's part of the reason that we take all this time and that we actually have a business that is focused on audio, because it is unlike other channels. There's a stat that you'll find in the document that shares that 39% of Americans believe that Most people can be trusted, but 70% of podcast listeners mention feeling a sense of companionship or connection with the podcast host. What that basically is saying is that when you're having a conversation, as we're doing here, and you're talking one-on-one, you're able to really unpack a thought, not a tweet, not a post, but a real conversation where you can explain something and build that trust and build that intimacy. Audio is in a place of its own, and that's why it warrants this level of dedication. And the way as a business that translates, it's not the biggest channel. It is a large channel, but the trust gives you the best return on investment. And we have seen time and time again, when a brand markets their business using audio, they will oftentimes say that the value of those customers is greater than any other paid channel that they participate in. I'm just going to read you one more quote from Shane Pitson, who's a fantastic marketing mind at Quip. And he talks about some of the complexities for why you need this level of specialization. And he says, you can't rely on vanity metrics in audio because they're not a reliable indicator of success. You have to go a level deeper, often on a channel by channel basis. You need to scrutinize on a sponsorship by sponsorship level. And, just to kind of underscore the point, and I know Giles is going to talk about this in a little bit, but audio is not to be trifled with. We have seen brands that have a really good way of measuring awareness, or they have a really good way of measuring ROI digitally, but it doesn't always apply to audio. And so people, rather than trying to overcome that hurdle, they'll just back away from the channel and not touch it, or just dip a toe in, but it could be so much more for them. So those are some examples that kind of illustrate why this is important and why we went to such lengths to articulate what the nuances are and how to engage them. All right, so tell me if you've ever heard of any of these companies. Indeed, Shopify, NetSuite, Headspace, Quip, Theragun, Postmates. I'm not only the host of the Media Roundtable, but also CEO of a company called Oxford Road, and we are the world's leading independently owned and operated audio ad agency. And what that means is that we help great companies, many that you have probably heard of on some of the other podcasts that you listen to. We help them test and scale campaigns in audio channels, with podcast being one of those leading channels. Some of the work that we do includes media planning and buying, as well as analytics, attribution, and insights. And we also have a very special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. We have our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. If you're looking to be involved in audio and you want a partner that can help work with you to make sure that you achieve unprecedented ROI and massive scale, you should get in touch with us at Oxford Road. And by the way, the only reason that we're able to do the work of the Media Roundtable is because we have a great team at Oxford Road that supports us and makes it possible. So, what we're doing is not just a podcast, but we're really trying to help brands live out their values and balance that with their business objectives, which is an increasingly hard thing to do in this world of misinformation and malice that's infecting so much of our media. But at Oxford Road, we don't want to just broker this stuff. We want to impact the industry for good. We want to raise the bar on what gets created. And Oxford Road is helping make that possible through the Media Roundtable. So if you're somebody that's interested in working with an ad agency or a partner on this type of work for your advertising campaigns, go to oxfordroad.com. It's easy to spell. And get in touch with us, or at least just sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer. That's oxfordroad.com.
I know you referenced Stu. Stu, I'd love to actually have you sort of provide the audience with the perspective on section 2 as we dive into audio's innate intimacy, upsides and downsides.
It's incredibly powerful, and that's something that we saw on display, like Dan has shared already, in hearing these marketers talk from the stage, talk with each other, and share their own stories of experiencing just how powerful it is. And something that stuck out to me from the summit was Paul Hillen saying that, like, when you really break down how long listeners listen to podcasts, and not even necessarily the most extreme listeners, like even on average. And if I stop and I think about it, as he was talking about this, many times we're spending more time with those podcast hosts than we are with our friends and family when you really break it down. Like, it is so intimate. There's so much relationship there that's being built between the audience and the host and people. Those relationships that the hosts build with their audiences is something like Paul Hillen, a fantastic marketer at Skims, understands so well. And so hearing him talk about that was powerful. And that's what this section is really about. Audio memory, audio, the power of audio is something that's continuing to get looked into over the last few years. It's faster than our visual memory. We remember stuff in audio longer. I was just reading about the T-Mobile Sonic logo and the gentleman that created that, Lance Massey, and he was just emphasizing the point in, if you're walking through the woods and you hear a twig snap, like the instantaneous reaction, the power that has is so incredible. And it's the marketers that were at the CAO Summit that understand that, are starting to leverage that. That audio is just incredibly powerful at helping us recognize a brand, differentiate it from other brands, and be able to recall it later.
Well, and speaking to that intimacy, Spencer, when you have that level of intimacy with your audience, you feel you have to always be honest with them. And sometimes with that, it comes at, you have to be brave, I guess. And so speaking to number 3, audio advertising rewards and requires fearlessness. What did you dive into in this section?
I talked about how that intimacy can be a double-edged sword for the CAO. You have this great relationship between the listener and the host that takes time to build. There's trust involved. As Dan previously said, 70% of podcast listeners trust in their podcast host, their opinions, their ethics, what they believe in. That goes also to the advertisement. And we see that time and time again in direct marketing and direct attribution. But nowadays, every host is a multi-hyphenate who also not just has a podcast. They have a YouTube channel. They have a TikTok channel. They're on Instagram Reels. They're doing skywriting. Who knows what they're doing? And in every avenue, in every media type, there is the chance for controversy. We've seen that in multiple recent scandals where people are dredging up things from 10 to 15 years ago. And as a CAO, it's difficult to trust in these hosts, to really put your time and your effort and your money into building that relationship. But most of the time we see that said controversy is relying mostly with the public. And if you take the time to build said relationship, the audience who actually cares about them the most isn't going to be affected by those ad dollars. Fearlessness often is rewarded time and again. You have to take the leap, regardless of context, because that will give you the best performance overall.
And I think we've seen this especially with comedy. I mean, comedians, we had Whitney Cummings at the event that Dan referenced on Wednesday night. She was part of the panel, who's an incredibly talented comedian. And I think you can see fearlessness, especially in her show, and her audience is there for it and they follow her with it. And as brand, I think like Shane in the white paper, Shane Pitson from Quip got into this pretty specifically, where he walked everyone through a case study where he was afraid of fearlessness, but also then really encouraged it. And I don't want to give up too much of the story, but it was a really interesting read to sort of A/B test fearlessness and that balance of control and letting go and sharing a genuine voice and the results that you would see when you do take that step. And so I guess to that point, when you're dealing one-on-one with hosts, Stu, though, as you mentioned in the next section of the white paper, like an endorsement is the holy grail, that fearlessness coming through, that honest message coming through, the intimacy, sort of all of these pieces are building blocks that support this holy grail host. Walk us through what you mean by that.
That it's the most powerful component, that in when it comes to persuasion, right? There's the pathos, the ethos, and the logos. There's a rational appeal and emotional appeal, but then there's the ethos. There's the why should I trust you appeal. That's what that's what humanity is built on. Who do I listen to and who do I trust? So the most powerful words in the lexicon of advertising are I use this and you should too. Then you enter the intimacy of the host. The host has a relationship with the listener. It's incredibly powerful. Then you layer on top of that the power of audio, like we were talking about before. Audio is processed in the exact same section of the brain that emotion is processed in. So you've got the trust, you've got the intimacy, you've got the direct link into human emotions. When you combine all of that together with a host saying, I use this thing and you should too, you have an incredibly powerful message that the listener is going to take action based on. Like Dan was talking about earlier, it's that the audiences, the impressions that you get in audio are so incredibly meaningful, and so that's the power that is there that can be leveraged is the stuff that we got to hear these CAOs talk about at the CAO Summit, and that you can read about in their stories, which is what I love about this white paper so much, where they unpack that even further.
Yeah, and I think Nick Caraft from Tommy John put it in the most direct way. His quote was, genuine endorsement is unique. It's the most powerful channel for the consumer, but it's also the most defendable for the brand. If you want to go toe to toe with Tommy John, then you can rip off our Instagram ads and have our identical look and feel, but you're not going to poach our host relationships from us. That's why the audio channel is unique. And that's why live endorsements within audio are the crown jewel. And we've seen that over and over again, and we see the results that follow. Some of those results are easier to measure than others. There's so many different ways to do this, and attribution obviously continues to be a challenge and an opportunity area for the industry. Giles, Stephen, do you want to share a little bit of insight on the metrics and attribution section of the white paper?
Yes, for sure. I think that what we're seeing both in the white paper and in the event that we hosted last week is a growing wisdom, if you will, from the brand community about how to approach attribution. And I think that, we're realizing that there's no one perfect answer, and that really using the best of all the tools that we have available to us in combination is really the right way to approach this. So in our last white paper, we were strong advocates of using a 2-tier survey where you're asking about channel level and about media property level. And we found that to be very successful. And with the trends in privacy that we're seeing and less data being available to marketers, that type of approach is going to be increasingly important, as are other non-digital approaches like MMMs, which one of our panelists at the event described as the gold standard of measurement. But we still need and want to use pixel-based solutions. They are standard in all digital marketing. All of our clients, all of our, the brands that we work with are using that type of methodology. They're comfortable with it. They're familiar with it. They understand the limitations, and it's easier for them to integrate some of the audio results that they see with some of the other channels they're measuring, because there's that alignment in the technology, at least in principle.
Yeah, I'd just add to that. Thank you, Giles. But I'd just add to that as there's been a theme in all of the different areas that we've been talking about in the summit and indeed in the white paper, there's a degree of bravery that's required. Whilst audio is arguably the beginnings of broadcast media, so it's been around for a long time. In many ways, we've seen with the changes over the past few years, it's experiencing a renaissance, and with a renaissance, it's almost like a bit of Wild West. So there isn't always the same ways that they can measure in the same way that a lot of the CMOs or CAOs, as we'll call them in this instance, have been able to be used to with digital media, where they have an abundance of research and abundance of data points with which to measure from. So I think getting that balance right by, also having a degree of kind of intuition about how we know the media is going to work is the right approach. And those advertisers that have agreed to sort of forge forward with how they're operating in audio with a degree of measurement with what they can do, but also understanding, how consumers are behaving and listening to the channels, have had the best results.
And having the best results can be sort of intimidating at the start when you're a newcomer to the space, given some of the challenges or the areas where podcasts is definitely still sort of growing into. And we wanted to make sure we were being really clear about that in our white paper. So we spoke to 4 of the marketers that were participating in each of the individual sections who are world-class at audio, amongst other things at this point. And we wanted to just have them provide concrete hints for a newcomer. If you are new to the space at all, if you have large budgets, if you have small budgets, like what one piece of advice could you give to somebody who is looking to dip a toe into audio? And Corey Ng from Shopify had a really interesting point of view here. He says, audio is a bit of a Frankenstein monster. There is also a heavy competitive component with brand implications and great branding opportunities. You have to be able to flex the creative part of your brain as much as the left data management and attribution side of your brain. And I think we talk about this a lot in our white paper. And Stu, you know this firsthand in creative. Dan, Stephen, Giles, Spencer, you guys know this from both creative, but also from metrics and analytics. Like, it is an art and a science with podcasts in a way that isn't necessarily true in any other channel. And that was a recurring theme that we heard from each of the brand marketers is don't underestimate the art section of this. A lot of other channels, you're really just looking at the science. It's math at the end of the day, but the art is there, and you can have the best, you could have the best podcast, you could have the best ads, you could have the best product, you could have all of the follow through in place, but that art piece is incredibly necessary. And that's one thing that many newcomers to the channel don't really learn, or they learn the lesson the hard way so many times, is really understand the creative, not just as a whole, but look at location, look at your host, look at their audience, look at the genre. You can't just apply a one solution fits all. East Coast language could be different than West Coast, et cetera. So really dive into that art way in a way that translates, because your results just will never be as strong. Excited for you guys to read other sections, and Shane Pitson had a great point of view, and Nick Carrot did as well. And they were consistent, and they had a little bit of variance, but I know we're running short on time, so I'll leave you guys to download that and hopefully use that as a little carrot that you don't need. But Stephen, to that extent, like for those coming into this space who are coming in a more significant way, who now have the brand safety and suitability tools in place where they can feel a little bit more confident in Spotify, to the points that we addressed earlier, who they may already have an agency and they want to just sort of quote unquote turn on audio. What is the point to work with a specialized agency over, say, a holding company from your point of view, and maybe touch on some of the other contributors' points of view as well?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest route isn't often always the best route, right? It's very simple to just lump all your money in a big budget. And I've been there. Take it from one who knows, who was in the larger agencies, and you could just fold it all in. And to allude to Dan's point at the beginning, at the very top of this call, where he mentioned that, in many instances, clients just consider a bit of an afterthought audio and maybe don't give it a credence that it actually delivers. Just a couple of points. Audio represents approximately 6 to 8%, depending on vertical, of spend. Yet there are numerous studies out there that show that across most of the audiences, and Giles, you can also talk to this, actually consumers probably spend almost about somewhere between 22 to 25% of their actual consumption of media time on some form of audio media, whether that's traditional radio, whether it's a podcast, whether it's streaming, or so on and so forth, or even a simulcast that's generated from an audio origin. And so with that effect, I think the answer is in the question itself. Why work with a specialized agency? Because it's a specialized platform and it's a specialized medium, right? And you're going to have the opportunity to enjoy all the stuff that I wrote in the white paper when you download it. But just to sort of refer to a few of those points, it's multifaceted. It's not just what we've seen over the last 8 years, actually, that same, the pie is still the same as we talked about at the CAO summit. It's still the same amount of money, but it's diversified in where the slices of the dollars are being pushed. And it really is within the revolutionary space of podcast. And that's extremely labor intensive. You need to understand the environment. You need to understand that you can't just go for flagship shows, but you need to dive really deep if you're going to make that 1+ reach actually effective for you and make your dollars not just work from a cost perspective, but from a value perspective, right? So those are really important areas. There's a number of different points there. I just want to dwell on a couple of them. Relationships are unbelievably important within the radio space. It is a very long form media. There's many years that people have been involved in it, and many of those individuals still play a part in the industry. And a specialized agency has the opportunity to reach those kind of people. In a large holding corporation, they tend, as I said earlier, kind of just think of it as an afterthought. So those are two key points. And it's just about, buying clout is important. We as an agency are not the largest agency in the world, but the concentrated amount of dollars that we have are going to always allow us an advantage based on the nuances in how you purchase and spend. And going to the relationship point, which I think is one of the most important, that was really underlined by a lot of the colleagues that we spoke to on the client side of the space. So Shane at Quip, Corey at Shopify, and indeed Nick at Tommy John all spoke to the value of having a specialized shop be able to nurture and leverage the relationships that they have in the industry. It took me, 20+ years to actually realize, but since I've been here, it's been a huge awakening, and I can see the value versus large agencies. So I would thoroughly recommend that to any newcomer or indeed any player in the space already.
And we've shared a lot how it's grown significantly over the past couple of years, but we wanted to end the white paper by painting a vision for the future. Giles, do you want to touch on some of the pieces that we addressed in the future section?
I think that there are a lot of really exciting and interesting directions we could see the business taking. At the recent podcast conference in London, there were some really interesting conversations about podcast content becoming increasingly dynamic and responsive to the environment in which you're listening, because you now have AI technology that is able to take a piece of text and reduce it to, maybe it's an hour-long piece of content. It can be summarized in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So you might be able to tell your podcast player, I have 20 minutes, and you'll get a 20-minute podcast instead of a 60-minute podcast. Or you might be walking past the Tower of London, and you might be able to pull up podcast content about the Tower of London that will last for 5 minutes because that's how long you're walking past. So we've got that fusion of AI and content creation that I think is going to create completely new frontiers for content and open up some really interesting opportunities for advertisers. I think something that we've been banging the drum a lot about at Oxford Road for a long time is conversational computing. And with, ChatGPT and large language models, obviously we see the interaction between humans and computers changing very, very significantly. And you can already, interact with ChatGPT via voice on your phone. And so we really are starting to see the dawning of a more conversational era. And obviously that creates really, really big implications for brands. And those that are really ahead of the game are already looking at very, very important topics like voice SEO, for example. And these are the types of things that we and all of our clients are going to be keeping a really close eye on over the coming years.
And I know we've just scratched the surface of everything that we shared in the white paper. As a heads up for anyone who wants to download it, you're able to find it by visiting oxfordroad.com/CAO or at oxfordroad.com. If you click on the thinking tab at the top of our website, it'll be right at the top. As a side note, our white paper addressing attribution is right below. So in case you hadn't had a chance to read that one yet, you can get 2 for 1 by going oxfordroad.com, click on thinking, and they are right there. Cannot wait for you to hear more from us, as well as the brands who participated in this white paper. Thank you to each of our very prestigious panelists today, Dan, Stephen, Giles, Stu, Spencer. It was an absolute delight to have you guys. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in audio and to use influence for good. As members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but edify, to build bridges instead of burning them, and to rise above our differences and show that collaboration is possible when we treat each other with respect. If you're a marketer looking to align with our vision, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road, by visiting oxfordroad.com and subscribing to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. Thank you to our guests, to the brands who contributed in our white paper, and to the Oxford Road members on our team who helped produce this podcast. Bianca, Kyle, Haley, and to the entire team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.